Hello and hi, my name is Connor. In this video, I want to talk about experimental Japanese rock music. And of course, I'm talking about Japanese music because that is all I talk about. So maybe if you've seen my video from about 2 months ago, in that video, I talked about Japanese jazz fusion from the last 25 years. When I was researching that video, I became so deep in the trenches with how there is this major intersection of all kinds of genres in Japanese music. Of course, in that video, I mainly talked about how that pertains to like jazz and rock fusion, but honestly, there's so much more than that. And for that reason, I wanted to make this video too because I want to talk about it so much more. Now, what is experimental music in Japan, or I guess in Japanese? Well, you have two options. You can either call it experimental music, or ongaku, or you can call it jikken ongaku. Or I guess you could call it jikken teki na ongaku. But that's kind of a mouthful. Before we start though, I do feel like I should define what I consider experimental music because it's kind of a blob of a genre. So to me, experimental music is something like how far can you take a genre until it's not that genre anymore? How far can we push pop until it's not pop? How far can we push rock until it's not rock? So with that as my sort of guiding principle, I have come up with the topics I want to discuss in this video, and then at the end I would like to also hand out some recommendations for some artists that I think are making some really nice experimental rock or pop or electronic or hip hop or jazz sorts of music. Okay, so right off the bat, I do want to say that I feel like there are like two separate kinds of experimental music. There is experimental sound, and then there is experimental intention. So I think for sound, the first example I can really think of is probably Metal Machine Music by Lou Reed. That thing is just sound. I do really feel like that is like the most experimental sound album pretty much ever. And then for experimental intention, this I really want to hone in on as it pertains to Japanese music. Because in my mind, probably the most prominent example of this would be Blume Popo's EP from, I want to say January, which is titled Test for Texture of Text. This is something I have been talking about all throughout the year. I talked about it in a Bandcamp video. I talked about it in my EP review. So I don't want to go over it again here, but basically, this is an album with, I think, 5 or 6 songs. Each of those songs actually only uses one specific vowel. So in the case of the first song, all of the sounds, and thereby all of the words, end in the sound ah. And then in the second song, they all end in e. And it's like that for the entire EP. And so now you're probably wondering, well, you know, what's so experimental about that? I feel like that in and of itself is like a real test of, you know, Japanese as a language. And not only that, Blume Popo are such skilled songwriters and musicians. They're actually able to make these songs sound like real and digestible. They sound like normal songs, even though the concept is so like wild and out there. And now that is some nice experimental rock. I would kind of say it's like indie rock, soft rock, math rock too in a way. So maybe if you like that, you should check out Test for Texture of Text by Blume Popo. Please sponsor me, Blume Popo. Okay, so now, what does experimental music look like in Japan in the year 2025? Maybe this is something of a hot take, but in my opinion, most experimental music is more so electronic aligned than really anything else. I feel like if you are making experimental music in like any genre, you're probably using some kind of digital workstation to be able to achieve that sound you want. And that's because you can sample, voice modulate, vocal effects, distort everything, run it backwards, do anything you want. And because of that, I feel like that is just very inclusive of like any idea anyone could ever have in regards to music. Making music is just so accessible for anyone nowadays. And just how cool is that, right? For that reason too, there are many artists in this video that I will be talking about who are not really part of the main cultural zeitgeist of experimental music in Japan. Some are. I will be talking about them at the forefront, but I think for the most part, this real new age sound of experimental music is really coming from those artists on Spotify with like 2,000 listeners. But I also at the same time feel like that's nothing new for experimental as a genre. Now, something I really want to mention is just how experimental can not be as well. I think in my mind, the aspect that most prominently denotes experimental music is probably the fact that it's very artsy. You know, it's like all kinds of weird sounds for the sake of art, for the sake of music. It's fun, or it's sad, or it's just everything flowing from out of an artist, right? And I think that's really where the distinction lies too, because anyone can make some kind of like EP or LP that has multiple genres on it. But I think it takes a real experimental artist to actually make it work into like a certain vision, and especially a very cohesive vision too. One example that I love that is the complete opposite of this is, sorry in advance, Tom Morello's not very good album, which is titled The Atlas Underground. Now, of course, that's not to say that this album isn't art, but I think there is a real difference between slapping genres together and actually making it work. Because have you listened to The Atlas Underground? Dog, it is not good. I'm really sorry if you like Tom Morello, but this ain't it. This is not good. No. But you want to know what is a good example of experimental pop? Plastic Beach by Gorillaz. Because on this album, Damon Albarn was like, I want to make this really plasticky, just synthetic sounding music that is so representative of the vibe and the concept and the lyrics and the album art. It all just works so well together that it just makes you feel and like hear just how unnatural everything is in this like world. So with all that said, this is my thesis. Without a vision for what you want your experimental music to be, you just have a playlist of songs. That is where the real challenge comes in making experimental music. You have to make it work. You have to make it like shine despite its very obvious flaws and sort of jigsaw-like qualities that should not fit together. You have to make them fit. And that is what really makes something a successful experimental album in my mind. With that said, let's talk about some more successful experimental albums in my mind. First and foremost, Hakushi Hasegawa, Mahōgakkō. This came out last year, and it was actually the topic of my very first video essay, which you can watch here via the thumbnail or up here via the actual link. This is an album I love so much. This is all over the place. It is like equal parts piano ballad and also bombastic, thunderous production from the genius Hakushi Hasegawa. I love everything about this, and as such, I made a 30-minute video on it. I think you should watch that because it really goes over my thoughts on the sound, the intention, and also the theming of all of the lyrics and the sounds on this album. But at the same time, I do really want you to listen to this album, so if you need a little taste, I would say that this is very much hyper pop and hyper jazz, which is of course very much leaning experimental too, and I think you'll like it even if you are really not a fan of those genres like I mentioned. It is just such a trip. It is something that is so different, but I think ultimately if you're able to make it all the way through and also watch my video, you'll love it. Okay, so another artist I do want to talk about is named Ohzora Kimishima. Ozora is a lot like Hakushi Hasegawa in that Ozora also makes some very bombastic, electronic, sort of pop-leaning music. This is an artist I feel like maybe 50-50 of my audience will know, and I think if you do know, you know how amazing he is, and if you don't, you're about to find out. And so with that said, I am going to be talking about his 2023 smash hit album, which is titled No Public Sounds. Mr. Kimishima has been around since 2020, and since then he has come out with some really cutting-edge experimental rock, pop, electronic work. His most recent was from earlier this year. This is also equally wonderful, and I don't know what genre to call this because it's everything all at once. So, yeah. But on No Public Sound, you get such a wide variety of rhythm and emotion and just creativity that is on a whole other level. I think in a way, his music is a lot like Hakushi Hasegawa. However, I feel like it's less pop and more rock. However, Kimishima is making this really grounded and gritty rock pop electronic stuff that is just the complete opposite. And so for that reason, I think that kind of dichotomy is really interesting, and I feel like, hey, maybe if you like Hakushi, you'll probably like Ozora, and vice versa. The next album I want to talk about is from an artist which is called Mizuirazu. They are a group of, I think, 4 guys, and this album is titled Throw Away the Water, Go Back to Intimacy. This album is like Music 2. This is the Music DS Lite. This is the Music 360. This is the Music Wii U. Okay, this is what comes next. This is experimental rock, or maybe even normal rock, that we'll be hearing 10 years from now. There are so many chefs in the kitchen here, and they've somehow cooked up this chimera of an album. The songs on here are so insane, yet so fun. On almost every single song, I have to do a double take because something happens on every single song that just hits me over the head with something I was not expecting at all. Like, for example, on the first song, which is titled Oboeru, let me know when you thought I did my double take on there. Just let me know in the comments. And yeah, I'll also need you to do the same thing for the song, which is about halfway through the track list, which is called Uturu. So I want you to pause this video right now and listen to it. I don't want to spoil it in case you cheated, but here's all I'll say. Did you happen to notice that Uturu is the only song in the track list with the explicit tag on it? So yeah, this thing is insane. I feel like I can't even really tell you what genre it could be because this is definitely another case where it's just every genre mishmashed together and it somehow works so well. It sounds so fantastic. It's so unique. And honestly, I think I'll probably be talking about it in my year-end video at length. So please check this out. Next up is a really interesting album from an artist named Yuka Nagase. This is titled Mofu. And this is sort of a new age techno electro pop album with a Shibuya-kei twist to it. This album really mixes dance tracks and then these very theatrical orchestral strings too. I think my favorite song on here is the one which is titled Wonderful VHS. This song just really exhibits how much fun Yuka is actually having writing these songs and recording all of the vocals. The hook for this song actually acts as sort of a way for her to explain what VHS means. Because here, it's not just a VHS like you would watch a movie on. So here is the exact lyric. V is for victory, H is for human, S is for S. This album combines wonderful pop vocals alongside some awesome jazz production that it's really not like anything else on this list, and you should check it out if any of that sounds interesting. Now, sort of in a similar vein, I do want to talk about Mao Sasagawa's latest album, which is titled Strange Pop. This came out a few months ago, and I think I was sold on it from the first 10 seconds. The very first song is titled Contactee. Just listen to those first 10 seconds, and you will know exactly where this album sits. It is a pop / punk / rock / industrial noise album that is probably the epitome of what I think experimental music sounds like in 2025. Maybe a good comparison for you 2000s heads would probably be like, you know how Shinsei Kamate-chan sort of injected pop into very dark rock? This is sort of like Mao is injecting dark rock into pop. It's like the complete inverse, yet it still sounds the same in a way. Yeah, that's what I'm cooking up here. Okay, so the album Asleep Above Creatures is by Misaki Umei. And this is so wonderful. This is a Hakushi Hasegawa-esque embellishment of electronic music with actual real orchestration. However, unlike Hakushi, Misaki is actually doing the inverse here too. She is more so focusing on that orchestral production with the electronic just kind of in the background as maybe an accompaniment. Here on this album, you can find lots of really beautiful jazz piano ballads alongside some really interesting sounding, very bubbly electronic production just everywhere but sometimes nowhere, and she really plays with like the infrequency of that production and also the timing of it. Again, hard to explain. I feel like maybe if you like that fantastical sounding electronic music, you should turn to this because I think this is very much in your lane. Next up is a band that I talked about in my favorite EPs of August video, and I spent a lot of time off screen practicing how to pronounce their name. And even when I started my video and I started recording it, I did not say it correctly. I'm gonna try to redeem myself here, but that's only because I have it written behind the camera. So the name of this band is Chocopa Kochokokinkin, and this is their album titled Tradition. This thing is bizarre. This is a approach to traditional music, but worldwide traditional music, so not just Japan. I would say that there's a lot of, I guess, Latin influence on here too. Furthermore, this album just sounds like the perfect combination of old and also new sounds in general. It for sure leans electronic, though it still uses a lot of traditional instrumentation too. For that reason, I would maybe call the genre of this traditional trance. Maybe that's just kind of what speaks to me, I suppose, but there is so much bizarre, cool world heritage music across this entire album that it is such an incredibly fascinating listen. I think it was in that EP video where I said, this band is going to be one of the best bands to ever come out from Japan in the next like 30, 40 years. I still stand by that. These guys just have such a uniquely organic sound that no one else is making music like this. And honestly, I don't know if anyone else ever will. This is such a treat to listen to. And when I got recommended this by two of my Japanese friends earlier this year, honest to God, it kind of changed how I viewed music. So really check this out. I literally don't think there's anything else like nice I could say about this album. This is just insane. Okay, so another album, which I also want to talk about, go figure, is going to be from the artist Yoshino Yoshikawa, and this is titled Timeless Echoes. This album maybe isn't quite experimental, maybe, but I think in the way that Yoshino is able to combine bedroom pop and jazz and also video game soundtracks is really interesting. Because Yoshino also sings on the songs across this entire album, it also has a lot of like vocal pop flair as well. I think if I had to come up with an original genre for this, I would call it fantastical whimsy. There is one song on here which is titled Look Ahead, and this is maybe one of my favorite dance tracks of the whole year. It is absolutely wonderful, and I listen to it like a few times a week. It is just in constant rotation for me. Oh yeah, one last thing I want to mention about this too is like a lot of the songs sound like Undertale music with a reggaeton beat. So if that sounds interesting, you should really check it out. There is one man who is making a lot of music this year. His name is Ritzky Akiyama, and 3 months ago he came out with an album which is titled Bum's Monk. This is not quite electronic experimental music like I've been talking about for the majority of this video. This is actually using a lot of analog instrumentation, which really sets it apart from everything else on this list. And now here's what's weird about it too. Sometimes it's bossa nova, okay? But sometimes it's also high-speed UK jungle. And sometimes it's rock, and sometimes it's pop, and sometimes it's all other things entirely. Now, I think for this custom genre, I would probably call it bassa nova. But I think ultimately this is more so aligning itself with like rock and pop just because of how the structure of the songs that Ritzky makes is very akin to songs from those genres. Like I said, there is a ton of acoustic instrumentation here. There is a real guitar, there is a real bass, there are real drums, and there are real maracas too. And I think if I have my timing right, he comes out with another album next week, and I am so excited for it. If you follow me on Twitter, I will be tweeting about it because I am just so excited after hearing this, and I think maybe if you try it out too, you will as well. Now, this next artist actually came out with an album this year as well. This is one that I've written a review for, though I have not gone around to actually making the video. This is going to be the album Yawning Civilization, or I want to say Bunmei no Wakubi, by the artist Utai Communications. This album features some really cutesy pop and dance tracks, with some really insane production too. There are 3 members, 2 of which are the lead singers. There is a female singer who is named Paya, and then the male singer is named Ishishi. And sometimes Ishishi raps. So, you know, this is kind of low-key a rap hip-hop album too, though only sometimes. It's very sparse, and that's very interesting to me. Here on this album, the trio also really utilizes sound really effectively in all kinds of ways, especially on one song, which is titled like Angel in the Bathroom. There is such an interesting recording of like swirling water in a bathtub. There's also a like phone dial sound, and there's just a lot happening in the mix. And I do feel like a lot of the songs on this album are actually like that too. I think generally, if you like my Mao Sasagawa recommendation, you will like this a lot too. Okay, and now we are on my last recommendation. This is maybe the most experimental album, but also maybe the least. This is going to be the album Junk Magic by the artist Puff. Here's why I think this is so interesting. I feel like you could really play any of these songs in a 2000s iPod commercial. You know the vibe and aesthetic a lot of those songs had, and these fit that to a T. And that's because a lot of these songs to me sound like every song from the UK over the past, let's say 60 years. because sometimes I hear the Beatles, and sometimes I hear David Bowie, and sometimes I hear Fatboy Slim. Despite that, I still hear a lot of Japanese rock influence here as well, such as Supercar, which I think is probably the primary example. One of the songs on this album is titled Peaky Freaky, and this sounds a lot like Chibo Mato, and that's where I see some of that experimental sound finally coming into play. Though, of course, a lot of this is just so all over the place. A lot of the songs here really feel like a combination of Japanese rock and also British rock, and also pop, and also electronic, and also hip-hop, and also dub too, maybe. The songs on this album, to me, really sound like a collaboration between time periods and also cultures. And that is what I think really makes this an experimental album in my eyes. And I guess also in my ears. And then kind of along that same line of thinking, there is one song called Electric Journey, and this very much sounds like a mix of early 2010s Charlie XCX and also Kero Kero Bonito, who are from the UK but sing in Japanese, so like... And there is so much fun and flavor across every song here, and I think maybe if you aren't even really a fan of pop music or electronic, some of the rock hits are like hitting here. There is a lot of psychedelic rock, there is a lot of, I don't even know what to call it, man. Blues even, there is a lot of alternative rock, there's a lot of soft rock, there's a lot of like shoegaze too, of course, because I mean, it's a rock album in the year 2025. It's so great. I love everything about this. And honestly, I love everything about all of these albums. And with that said, that's it. That's everything I have to talk about Japanese experimental music in 2025. You know, sometimes it feels like music has nowhere else to go from here. Somehow, artists always find a way. And I think for me, that's what I love about experimental music. They are just always on that, like, cutting edge of sound and ideas that are constantly shaping the future of music. And that's just so cool, I think. These artists and many more are just simply unstoppable, and I am so looking forward to whatever they come out with next. But I am just so excited for all of these artists, and like I said, many, many more, who are, going to be making music for however long, and I get to, like, eat all that up. I'm so excited, and hopefully you are too. Okay, and now I've said my piece. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you will stick around and subscribe to watch more, because all I do is talk about Japanese music. That is my thing, and hopefully you know that if you're subscribed, but if not, that's my thing. So maybe you should do something experimental and hit subscribe, leave a comment, leave a like, tell your friends, hey, I'm over here making videos over here. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.